Thank you, Matt. Okay. First of all, a little bit of background, I think, about the school that I teach in, so you get a flavour for where this fits, and it might be able to, for you guys to put it in your school context as well. Okay? So it's not by way of an apology about what you're going to hear, but by way of an explanation. Okay, because we'll be getting things on various levels for various academic standards as well, and I think it's just important so you know my context. So I'm at the Ipswich Grammar School, which is a GPS school, and so it does have some very high achieving academic students, but they're not all like that. There's the engaged and the disengaged. We have quite a number of boarders, and they're made up of ESL students, boys from China, and a growing number from PNG, whose English therefore would be their second language or even their third language in some cases, and a very large Aboriginal contingent as well. So we could have cohorts that have 6 English classes, small for some schools I suppose, but so there's a number of students of a number of various ability levels. Okay, so what we try and do in this particular style of writing, as with all the other styles of writing, is to hope that it will be understood by all, executed by most, and maybe mastered by some. So we want to put things, because we have such a diverse cohort, we want to put things in language that students are going to understand and in concepts that they're going to understand as well. So you won't be getting too many, you might be getting some cute little phrases out of me that are easy for students to understand, but not too much in the theoretical, academic-y type vocab, okay? What we're trying to do, I suppose, is over a number of year levels, from 7 through to 12, is to attack this narrative writing idea and make it applicable, make it accessible to all those year levels for lots of different reasons. Okay, we've got many masters to serve. We've got syllabus documents that we have to sort of stick by. We've got NAPLAN that we have to prepare for every year. And then we also need to get them into year 11 and 12 ready for the demands of those sorts of tasks. And so the whole creative writing, narrative writing idea flows through all those year levels. Okay, there's our background. Now, you're going to get a number of pieces of advice, and hopefully they'll all sort of come together as we go. Okay, so there's a number of little techniques, ideas that you would have heard before, I'm sure, some from other people, and then a couple of ideas that I've developed myself over time. All right. Now, first bit of advice. Numero uno, do the task yourself. If you can't do it, then the students can't do it. So, whatever it is, if it's one of these pieces of narrative, if it's an analytical exposition on a certain topic, if it's a feature article, a persuasive speech, even if it's an exam that you're setting that's just for short paragraphs, perhaps for a younger grade, you have to do it yourself. When you do it yourself, lots of stuff becomes apparent. So, literacy task X. We learn something about the subject matter, perhaps we get a deeper understanding of the subject matter. The generic structure becomes much more at the forefront of our thinking. We think about the purpose of the task, we think about specific language techniques. When we're working through these things ourselves, right, we think about the vocabulary that we might have to really aim at, how long it'll take to complete. How many times do we set tasks that suddenly become just almost impossible for students to complete? Or if you're perhaps you're being a supervisor at a maths exam in your school, and it's time's up and the students are only halfway through, I don't think maths teachers are very good at doing the tasks themselves. Okay, we think about the grammar, planning steps, the technology requirements even, and in the case of this task, how bloody hard it is to write figuratively, which is one of the main things that we want to try and work on today. Okay? Write me a good metaphor, will you? Off you go. Okay. So, there's a couple of opportunities that we will give students to write creatively. So, one of those opportunities will be to respond to a text like a novel, a poem, a play, and out of that we want them to create a narrative or creative piece of some sort. Okay? Sometimes we ask students to look at their own lives and to create personal narratives. Okay? The subject matter is much easier, I suppose, when we're dealing with the text. There's the subject matter, there are our characters, there's our situation, the themes are there for us. We want you to play with those characters, those themes, that whole situation. Okay? The trickier part is when we're just trying to get students to draw from their own experience. They look at you dumbly. I haven't done anything. I've got nothing to write about. All right. So just a few ideas about maybe how we can sort of spark a bit of interest, get the creative juices flowing for those students who scratch their head and look dumbly at you. So just a couple of ideas. Perhaps from photographs that they may access. I'm trying to show off my PowerPoint skills here. I was pretty impressed with Bev's PowerPoint. Very clever. Hopefully you'll be impressed with mine as we go. Right. So here we've got some family photos from my family and places. And the one on the top left is my youngest son with a snake around his neck, and we'll be using that idea a little bit later on. We've got Nelson Mandela's prison cell on Robben Island. We've got elephants in Africa. We've got Istanbul, and then. So photographs might be the way in for some students. Maybe objects at home. It might be simple objects at home, or it might be significant objects at home. This one, for example, is a tobacco tin that my grandfather had in World War I. And that's been the source of some really good stuff that I've played around with it in the classroom as well. So that's not a bad idea. Another idea that other writers have used. You may be familiar there with Middle-earth. Okay, I reckon before Tolkien wrote all that sort of stuff, he had to draw himself a map. He had to get himself sorted out where everything was. And when he started developing this story that went forever, which I've never been able to read, by the way, I'm sick of guys going over this hill and through this valley, and nothing really happened in the first couple of hundred pages, so I gave it away. I'm not a big believer in spending a short life reading stuff that you don't really get turned on by. Anyway, so all the Game of Thrones, that's much more to my liking. They've had to create a world where things have been, where their characters exist and where events take place. Why not then get students to draw a map to get their own memories flowing? Okay, so here's the little one I prepared earlier. I'm using the fade technique there. So at some time in my youth, I grew up at a place called the Isa Central Sugar Mill. And I've just done a very rough map there of some houses, some dams that we swam in, and little reflections along the way of little events that may lend themselves to little bits of narrative, or we like to use the term vignette, particularly for my Year 12s, a little narrative that's a snapshot of life. So we've got dams and lobbies and smoking banana leaf cigarettes. That was a bad afternoon. There's the Isis Mill Primary School that I didn't go to. There's a little bridge I doubled Debbie Raybon across one afternoon. That was a good afternoon. There's the Weebles house with 1,000 chooks. I was given the job one Christmas holidays of looking after all these chooks. I was sort of terrified of chooks, but my parents were very good at agreeing for me to do favours for other people. And one of them was going to the debut with Rosine Mamino, One was looking after the Weebles chooks. One was to be an altar boy for about 6 or 7 years. And it was good to leave home at last so I could start saying yes to things by myself and not have mother do it for me. All right, what I want you guys to do, just for a couple of minutes, is to think of some place from your past. Maybe somewhere where you grew up, a neighbourhood, a street. And I want you to just spend a few minutes drawing a little mud map like that of the place where you grew up. And see if there's any little memories get triggered of people, games that you played, somewhere where you broke your arm, anything like that. And as you go, just write yourself a little reminder about the event. Any little reflection that you might have as you remember that place, that hidey hole. Okay, I hate to spoil your fun. There'll be a number of times I'll do that to you. So we'll make a start on a few things, get you playing with a few ideas, and just because of time, we'll then just need to move on. But yeah, just have a bit of a wave at me if there was something that sort of cropped up as you were drawing that. You thought, oh, that might develop into some little vignette there, okay, that I hadn't thought of for a long time. All right, so the students, I can't think of anything soon, you know, and so that the photograph idea, the object idea, the map idea may just get them thinking. May not. You may have to have these one-on-one conversations with students where you sort of have to be like a detective and start probing them for ideas. All right, now moving on. Hopefully we've perhaps got an idea. One of my colleagues once wrote a piece about throwing a rock in the playground and hitting the wrong kid in the head, and that just led to all sorts of dramas. And he was then able to take the next big step in this process, which was to attach a theme to this moment. So we need some subject matter to talk about, but if it's just subject matter, it's just this recount. And we need to go deeper than that. So each piece of writing, doesn't matter what it is, needs a theme. Okay, in analytical exposition, it's a thesis, but in other pieces, it's a theme. So what's this theme about, and how do we make students try and understand it? All right, well, let's use the Nile as a bit of a metaphor, because we'll use that later on as well. And I think the Nile is a great way to try and understand theme. If you remember if you're old enough, remember your social studies in primary school. They used to show you illustrations of the Nile, which was this nice green bit that ran down the desert through Egypt. And that's how it looks like if you've ever flown over that. It is just this fertile vein that runs through this country. And that's what a theme is. Okay, it's the vein that runs through your piece of writing. So we need to be able to represent that idea to students so that they'll understand it. Okay. And so it's language that you can keep coming back to refer to it. All right? When they're missing their theme, or that their theme is there but then it's not there, and then it's there again. Right? So we need language to try and talk to those students so that they'll, okay, I get what I meant. I get what I'm missing there. I understand where we're going there. Right. So the preceding activities is about identifying moments in life. But as I said, to take it beyond the recount, we need to establish a theme. All right. And just that last sentence there gives the text direction, nourishment, and meaning. There we go. All right. And then trying to explain it to students. So maybe language like this. And the language would perhaps need to alter depending on the age group. So the theme of the story is what is revealed about life during the character's experiences, or even what the character learns about themselves. It could be that he or she learns the importance of being honest, or the character discovers who they really are when faced with a challenge, or that once you've thrown the rock, you can't get it back again when it hits that poor kid in the head. Okay. So you've got to be telling the students, be constantly thinking about ways to incorporate the theme in your narrative. And the way to do that is having your character regularly reflect on the events that are described. Okay? There'll be more on reflection later. But I'm trying to find almost a recipe for students to follow. And it sounds a little bit, okay, like we're joining the dots. But as I said, such a diverse range of students that we need to bring them to that point where they can produce some meaningful text that have got some structure and that have got some features there that you can identify and say, yes, you've really got the theme there. You've really got a good extended metaphor there. Okay. All right. Perhaps we present some students with some themes. For example, if we're looking at a novel and we want to develop a piece of narrative from that novel, well, here are some of those themes in that novel. Let's start at that point, shall we? So a person who is timid transforms into a fighter when they are threatened. Sounds a bit like Tomorrow in the War again, doesn't it? The importance of staying calm in a crisis and the outcome if you don't. Proving the hard way that honesty is the best policy. So when we were studying Tomorrow When the War Began with my Year 9 class early in the year, we were doing a little bit of narrative writing, and I was getting them to, okay, what's your theme going to be? So these guys hadn't gone through this, too much of this process. So I was getting them step by step. Okay, let's decide on that piece. Let's decide on what the part of the story is you're going to write about. Now what's the theme that you're going to be concentrating on? All right. Now there's 1,001 themes. Just a couple. What does a personal conflict reveal about two individuals? How do events find or define your identity? A demonstration of the place or family in your life. Right. So themes aren't just single words. They're more complex ideas than that, I think. Now there's some of those in that coloured booklet that you've got. And certainly, if you want to email me, I can sort of send you a copy of this presentation as well. So yeah, you don't need to be writing every word down at all, because I'm very happy to share. Now, one thing that we could do that I have been developing is this thing called like a writing themes bank. So all those ideas that just sort of keep popping up in class or come up in text, put them together in a bank, and there's part of a bank in that coloured handout as well. And so kind of leads to the next idea. Well, there's one slide behind there, sorry. You know these PowerPoints, they show you one thing, but there's something slightly different up there? All right. So we've got the student who does his little drawing or finds his picture. I've got this great idea. And that naturally leads on to the development of a theme. Maybe it doesn't work like that. Okay, maybe start the process talking about the theme. So your first couple of attempts to get students thinking about a good idea didn't work by trying to come up with a subject matter. Maybe you start with the theme idea. So maybe you present them with the bank of themes. and perhaps the theme comes first, and they say, oh, something like that happened to me. There was an event in my life where last holidays I did something pretty stupid, and that would be, yeah, that fits in with that theme. I think I can run with that idea, sir. Rightio, let's go. Right, so just a couple of ideas there about where to start. Now, some other, just another thing to contemplate, what sort of stories are the best? Are stories about struggles the best? Well, probably, but not everyone has struggled too much in their lives, but some students have. So in the movie Shadowlands, writer C.S. Lewis, the main character, makes a speech about suffering in our lives. He says that suffering in our lives is a gift. I just like this quote. Through suffering, we release our holds on the toys of this world. We're like blocks of stone, out of which the sculptor carves the forms of men. The blows of his chisel, which hurt us so much, are what make us perfect. So it's just sort of like, okay, you guys, when we're writing this piece about this thing that happened to you, which wasn't great, but how did it make you a better person? Or how did it make you, we do a thing in Year 10 about transitions to manhood, right? How did that experience take you a little bit further along the path to being a man, a good man? So, time for something practical. So this isn't my idea, this is James Maloney's idea. You might be familiar with James's novels. He's a Queensland writer. I went to a workshop of his many years ago now in Ipswich. How long ago would that be? It'd be over 15 years ago, easily. And this idea is delete, change, add. Now, you've got a handout there, which I'm going to draw your attention to in a second. Right now, in fact. So it's the one. It's got 3 columns. Now let me just explain James Maloney's idea to you. So, just imagine there's a student who wanted to write about this event one day called The Ride, and he came up with a series of bullet points about what happened. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Okay? So that's in the first column. So Jason and Kenny go over to Wayne's house to ask him to come riding. Bozo and Gaz are there too. They ride to Simon's place to get him to come. They ride to the forestry reserve where there is a track. Kenny gets a flat tyre. They go home with him to get it repaired. They ride back to the forest. They start the ride down the mountain. They come to a sharp bend. If they misjudge it, they'll end up in the bushes. They get round the bend, meet a bunch of slower riders who frustrate them. They bunny hop through the bush to overtake them. They come to the bottom of the hill. All right. So that's the student's idea. Rather than toss it out and say start again, that's rubbish, we do this thing called delete, change, add. All right, and it's explained fairly briefly there in the top left. So delete, so the first process is to delete information that's not necessary. You need so many characters. Can you do justice to so many in the story? Are there details there that are just going to slow things down? Okay, remember, most of the things that we set in English, in the younger grades, it might be 300 to 400 words, and they go to 500 to 600 words, and then, we're really only asking them in Year 12 to sort of write 800 to 1,000 words, or maybe 1,200 at the max, okay? So narrative writing has to be very tight. We can't be writing these aimless, endless pieces that begin with waking up and cleaning your teeth and having breakfast before anything exciting happens. All right, so we get rid of stuff. So obviously, you'd get rid of stuff like going over to Wayne's house, and Bozo and Gaz are there too, okay? And do we want to know that they ride to the forestry track? Probably not. Okay, so delete is about being tough, getting rid of rubbish. The next thing you do is the change part. So change the order of the information. First thing you want to do is to have a good starting point, and then probably the next most important thing you want to decide upon is where's the climax. So you need to sort of go, okay, I'm going to start here, not having breakfast and not riding around the neighbourhood aimlessly. We're going to start somewhere exciting, and we're going to be building that to somewhere even more exciting. All right? And then the add part is, oh, how else can I juicy this piece up? What can I add to this ride down the mountain? And maybe I can throw some weather in there. Maybe I can throw some girls on the track that I'm trying to show off to. Maybe there's an animal that leaps out. Fallen tree, okay? Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. You can add some good stuff, all right, without making it too spectacular. Okay. So what I've done in the second column, and this is for your job, let's assume that I've done a bit of a delete and a bit of a change and a bit of an add, and we've come up with 10 new bullet points. Some of the old ones are still there, but there's some new ones. But I've jumbled them up. I just want to get you guys to spend a moment or two trying to put our new set of bullet points into a logical flow, and hopefully it's going to reflect this structure that we'll be talking about shortly as well. Okay, where's our new starting point? Where's our climax? What's going to lead up to the climax? Away you go. Okay, I'll give my students a bit longer than that. So what's the obvious new starting point, do you think? Any volunteers? What do you reckon? Arrive at the top of the mountain. Okay, we don't care how they got there, but this story needs to, one of my year 9 students, O'Shane Pereira, came up with this phrase, sizzling start. Yes, we need a sizzling start. So we're at the top of the mountain, and that's where this story is going to begin. And obviously they're going to face this dreaded Dead Man's Bend. If any of you grew up in the country, there was probably a hill somewhere that everyone had to test their courage on, going down their bike or their go-kart. In my growing up, it was Hospital Hill. And because it was behind the hospital, and some blokes wound up in the hospital. Graham Hughes, not Graham Hughes, his brother Rodney. Graham was sort of the brighter one, Rodney wasn't so bright. They built this go-kart, and they thought they'd make it look sexy with putting these bits of metal sticking out the back like flames. Yes, his bum wound up on it. And it was a good thing the hospital was close by. Okay, so obviously we're starting at the top of the hill. These guys are anxious as they go down. Whatever the order, but we need to have rain before the glasses fog up, okay? And then maybe things get more dramatic when the fox jumps out and so on, okay? But the climax is what's going to happen when they get to this Dead Man's Bend, all right? So we've gone from having a bit of a long, exhaustive list of ideas to a much tighter group of ideas. And we've got ourselves something to go on. We've got ourselves a good structure there. And maybe the theme, silly boys trying to test their manhood, perhaps putting themselves in physical danger just to try and impress others, something like that. All right, let's have a look at another example. back to the Nile. So, this is a piece that my youngest son wrote when he was in Year 12. He's now a third year uni student. So, we went to the Nile. So, he came up with this. We sailed from Luxor to Kamumbu. You've got this in your book, I think. For breakfast, we had hot chocolate with our bacon and eggs. We had a buggy ride to the big temple. The next stop was a temple devoted to crocodile sacrifices. Late in the afternoon, we walked back towards the Nile with our cruise ship. Saw a man in old Egyptian gear on the side of the path. He motioned for me to sit down. He had two mysterious baskets beside him. He opened one and produced a cobra that he put around my neck. My parents looked startled, but I was enjoying the experience. Dad took some pictures, and then we left for the ship. All right. So, he didn't like those. I sort of wrote those when I looked at his piece and I remember the experience. So, this is slightly contrived. So, we need to whack the old delete, change, add theory to that. And all right, here's some fancy PowerPoint skills, I hope. So, first of all, delete. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Maybe there's some potential in some of those. Go back in. Maybe there's some potential in the rest there. Okay? Certainly this snake. Certainly this bloke with the basket. And he willingly sits down beside this bloke with the basket. All right? Now, if you know something about my son, he's just come back from Vietnam. Previous holiday went to Malaysia. Previous holiday did all these adventure things in New Zealand. The day school was over, he was planning to move out of home, and within a month he had. Okay, so he was a guy determined to be independent. So this was him writing in Year 12 about this moment when he was a much younger boy. Okay, so I'm just trying to lead you to where he might have been going with this particular story. So he's used this incident to be this launch pad for a piece that has a much deeper theme. All right. So, and this is in your booklets too. So a new bullet point list after a delete, change, add has been done. So I find myself sitting on a square of cardboard on a dusty path in Egypt, staring a cobra in the face. Events lead up to this moment include the family in Egypt on holiday, dragging themselves back towards the Nile cruise boat after a hot day sightseeing. I spot an old man beckoning me to sit down. He has baskets. I ignore parental advice about staying close to them. Reflect on the journey to this point. So in the blue there, we've got those telltale stages of a narrative, the orientation or the sizzling start. Then we need a bit of backfill. You could call it TikTok, whatever you want to call it. But just that little bit of going back in time to fill in some of the details that the reader will need to know to appreciate where you are, when this was happening, who was involved, sort of thing. Okay, rising action. He drapes the cobra around my neck. Reflect on parental protection and family history of killing snakes. That's another story. Maybe some Garden of Eden reference, being tempted. And then building to the climax, the cobra, Nile, scales, etc. become a combined metaphor for a transformation and ongoing journey of discovery in his life. Okay, return to the narrative, parents' reactions, photos, backsheesh, you have to pay for those sorts of things. And continue on, somehow renewed to follow the river where it leads. Right, so that's basically where his final vignette went. All right. Started with, he had this incident, and when it came down to writing, he needed to tighten it up, didn't help me much. Okay, and so let's have a look at that whole structure thing. Would have seen this 1,000 times. I'll keep drawing it on the board when we're doing these sorts of tasks, just to keep reminding students, where are you at with your piece? Where have you started? Where should you have started? Okay, so it's the old, this axis is excitement, drama, conflict. The other axis is time. We need to start somewhere exciting. So traditionally it goes orientation, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, exposition. sort of started using this sort of language: sizzling start, backfill, tick-tock, rising action, obstacles, conflict, climax, falling action, resolution, which you want to wrap up pretty quickly at the end. Now, the red dots are all about reflection. So, just getting students to think, I have to reflect along the way here. After every event, after every incident, what am I thinking? What was I thinking? What am I thinking about that now? What are my thoughts and feelings that are going through my head? And that's the opportunity, I think, to start developing the theme much more deeply. So we've got this recount of these events, but it's when the character in the story, or if it's yourself, you're reflecting on the events that have taken place. That's where we start the theme developing. So in his case, it was about his growing independence and how he used this metaphor idea to establish that in his story. All right. So, teacher, where do metaphors come from? So, first of all, I ask students to try and look inside the story. Look at the environment where your piece is taking place, where your vignette's taking place. Is there some object there? Is there, like we're doing Animal Farm, for example, and we're perhaps doing a feature article on Animal Farm. I'm trying to get students to include some figurative language in that. We start thinking about wells, we think about whips and yokes and fields and harvests and those sorts of things. They all lend themselves to extended metaphors. The harvest, for example, could be the seeds of the revolution were planted, but under the reign of Napoleon, those seeds never germinated. Or animalism has died in the field, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So there are objects in the story that lend themselves to the extended metaphor. All right. So in the case of this piece about the Nile, just a bit of a brainstorm on some Nile-y type things. So we've got snakes, we've got snake skin, mummies, the texture of their skin perhaps. We've got the whole Garden of Eden thing with snakes. We've got the Nile itself. All right, let's just have a look at a glimpse of something from the final piece of his writing. So the serpent had shown me the forbidden fruit of the outside world. He presented its succulent juices of independence, making me want to leave the luscious garden my parents had planted for me. The temptation of the flesh of the earth was too sweet not to try, and I was filled with the desire to have it. It would be years before I could taste it, but the seeds were planted in my mind. And then, from the resolution, following the track over the crest of the hill, we were greeted with the sight of the Nile. The water flowed down from the south to the north, giving life to all of Egypt. The Nile was Egypt's cold blood. Its arteries and veins swelled and emptied to the steady beat of the country's heart, the rains and seasons fueling life and growth. The glistening current slid and weaved its way through the countryside. It never turned back, only at times splitting in two streams running away from each other, following different paths. I wondered if they would meet up somewhere. And so everything was leading to that point, this independence that he was feeling, like sitting beside this snake with his father standing there who grew up in the country, with parents who grew up in the country, and the snakes didn't sort of want to hang around too long, otherwise there'd be things done to them, unfortunately. Sorry to any conservationists out there, but they could be dangerous. All right. So, and here he was flirting with that thing, but then he starts flirting with this idea of being the independent guy and weaving all that sort of Nile-y metaphor through there. Okay. Has this been done before? You bet your life. Here's one of my favourite songs. So, Bruce Springsteen's The River. So he writes this song, hope you know about it, where the guy in the song goes down to the river with the girl, and she gets pregnant, and life goes bad from there. I come from down in the valley. I don't need to be prompted too often. I only get asked once though. Okay, let's just have a look at the stuff in red. We'd ride out of the valley down to where the fields were green. We'd go down to the river, and into the river we'd dive. Down to the river we'd ride. Starting the relationship, things are great. Things are green, river flowing. That night we went down to the river and into the river dive. Go down to the... That's pretty repetitious. Next bit. But I remember us riding my brother's car, her body tan and wet down at the reservoir. At night on them banks I'd lie awake and pull her close just to feel its breath she'd take. Now those memories come back to haunt me, they haunt me like a curse. Is a dream alive that don't come true? Or is it something worse? It sends me down to the river, though I know the river is dry. And so it's just a really simple idea, but the river was rich and flowing as their hope was in the relationship and love, and then things go bad, has to marry the girl, economy goes rubbish, he loses his job, or it's hard to get a job at least, and then the river runs dry, just like everything else does in their lives. Okay. It's just sort of tailor-made for the story. The two sort of go hand in hand. And if it's possible for that to happen, it's a real magic moment. All right. So, just like we had a themes bank before, maybe we could have a metaphors bank for those guys who can't find the metaphor. And there are some things that lend themselves to metaphors that, you know, they get a little bit cliche perhaps, but they're a starting point for those guys who haven't got a starting point. And so that's sort of a little fragment of the types of this metaphor bank idea that I've got, which is a bit of a work in progress. Now, just another thing that you can do for students is a bit of a hand-holding technique. All right, we've taken them to a certain point. They know what they're going to write about. They know roughly what their theme is going to be. And okay, let's go, guys. Maybe this is just an activity leading up to the summative assessment. Maybe it's this formative piece that we're going to do in class. But we need to get their training wheels on. Need to get them heading in the right direction. So you could say, okay, I want you to. We'll start with our opening paragraph. We need to set the scene, describe the place, describe the time of day. I want you to talk about the light or the darkness. Don't tell me what time it is, let's talk about the light. Talk about the heat perhaps. Okay? Don't use I in the first two sentences. Tried that one, worked really well. Right, because they have to start giving us a bit of, in film, that sort of detective fiction, film noir type narration, they call it weather report narration. So a couple of sentences where they're not even part of it yet, but they're kind of setting the scene. Okay. Now describe noises, smells, sights, perhaps. Some appeals to the senses. Tell me what the character's thinking. All right. There's that red bit. There's that reflective element. Okay. Then you might ask them, give them time to do that. Then the next sentence comes along and you lead them through that one as well. Okay? Maybe begin to reveal something about the personality of your character through their thoughts and actions. Have them dwell for a moment on something related to the story's theme, a bit more of a thought, perhaps a surprise sentence, surprise idea in that last sentence of the first paragraph. Okay? And onward we go. So, just an idea. Next paragraph, let's do this. What has led up to this point? So you're leading them through that backfill paragraph. Okay? So continue in this vein, bit by bit, sentence by sentence, or paragraph by paragraph. So for a particular age group and for summative assessment, you need to judge how much is too much. All right. Now you've got an example of a student piece there in front of you called Crucial Decision. Lost. I might just sort of pick up the pace a little bit. So, in that first paragraph, this is about some boys, a bit like that Dead Man's Bend piece that we did, but these guys go on a bit of a ride on a family holiday, and some boys decide they're going to get a bit cocky and dash ahead of the parents and get lost. So let's just have a look at where the possible theme is developing in that first paragraph. So up on the screen there, we were strictly told not to go out of their sight. But it's already clear that this rule would bend. 12-year-old boys are somewhat fitter and keener than cautious parents. So early on, he is starting to make obvious what that theme's going to be. Okay, we can see where it might be leading. And then this other bit here, a hint of a water metaphor, a motif that will develop later. Dry heat washed over us. Okay, so we'll just whiz through a few of these things. So themes developing still. Freedom seemed to encourage cockiness. Our relief vanished into thin air. Realisation hit like a tidal wave. We've defied our parents and gone the wrong way. All right. So you can see how the theme's developing. Now look, we're also sort of pushing this idea about metaphor. And because of the subject matter, hot, dry bush, getting thirsty, water seemed to be the obvious way to go. So sounding like waves of panic. You can certainly take that with you and look at this more closely another time. Only drops of water left. Fear, heat and thirst started to ravage our bodies. We started cramping up as dehydration did its best work. Panic surged like a storm. Okay. Strong current, dehydration. Okay. Trapped tears. All right. So he's loaded up that paragraph pretty well with this extended metaphor that I certainly have been inspired by the subject matter of the story. What have I got there? Got the conclusion. You've got the whole thing. All right. Now, perhaps the cure for all woes. See the cure for all woes? This bloke here, his name's A.B. Facey, Albert Facey. And sometime when I was a schoolboy, he released this book called A Fortunate Life. And it was the book that the lady down the road bought and lent to my mother, who then lent to the lady next door, who lent to the lady next door. So I reckon for every single copy that he sold, 8 or 9 or 10 people could have read the thing. And still, when I was at uni, a lecturer came along and said, oh, yeah, there's this book, A.B. Facey's Fortunate Life, biggest selling novel by an Australian author in Australia. I don't know if it still is, but at that time, okay, that idea sort of stuck with me. Okay, this guy couldn't read or write until he was a teenager, and yet he's written this book about his own life experiences that had sold more copies than any other Australian author at one time in history at least. What was the secret? So I sort of went digging through A Fortunate Life, trying to do a bit of analysis on it, and trying to make it, not at that point, years later when I was a teacher and I was trying to get these students to write in this sort of style, what can we learn from A.B. Facey, I thought. And so the big revelation was that there are these roughly 3 sentence types. So sentences about the writer, so sentences that had I, me, us, we in them, what he was doing, or what the writer's doing. Then general sentences about the situation, the scene, other people, background ideas, background information. And then there were sentences about thoughts, feelings and reflections. All right, let's have a look at a couple of examples, and I've colour-coded them. There's an old QCS paper example that was published some years ago called Mud, Mates and Matchbox Cars. And I love the question that guy at the end of the last session asked, do writers do these things intuitively or not? And certainly some do, but I guess these processes that I'm talking you through is about, well, giving those students the roadmap, giving them the recipe to follow. And the intuitive ones will go beyond that, but there's so many of those guys who need this that done for them, I suppose. So the sandpit in the back corner of our yard was the life of the neighbourhood. General information. We would sit for hours at a time in the shade of the swaying leopard tree with our bodies waist deep in mud. That marvellous mud, what a joy, feeling word, it was to slosh about without a care in the world, creating cities of matchbox cars and army men. Okay? From A Fortunate Life, I was told to stand close while the old lady was milking and take notice of the way it was done. He's milking a cow for the first time. She milked 2 cows, then made me sit on the milking stool with the milk pail on the ground under the next cow to be milked. This frightened the wits out of me as I was afraid of cows. The old lady showed how to squeeze the teats to make the milk come out. But try as I may, I couldn't squeeze hard enough, being under 9 years old and a little too young for milking. Okay. So, often there's sentences that have a bit of each, but you can identify what the prominent element is in each sentence. Is it about the person? Is it about general information that we need to know? Is it about thoughts and feelings? And I think there doesn't have to be this equal balance throughout a whole piece, but a piece of writing of this nature does need a combination of those things. If all the student wrote was the blue sorts of sentences, it would be, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, then I did this, then I did that. Okay? We need some other information that goes along with that. That's the green stuff. And what gives it a theme is the red stuff, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And who's going to watch a TV show? Who's going to see a film, read a book, that we don't get into the emotions of the characters that are involved? So that's an absolute vital element. So if you think of nothing else, think of just that 3 sentence types. And then when you get students to colour code it on their computers, they're having to think about what sort of sentences that they're writing. And if they do it accurately, you can look over their shoulder and you say, where's the red stuff? Where's the green stuff? You haven't got enough of this, you haven't got enough of that. Or when you read their draft, you can say, you know what you're missing? You're missing reflection. Or here's an opportunity to reflect. Something dramatic's just happened there, you haven't reflected on it. And the process of leading them to this point will make it obvious, I know what he's talking about. Okay? Or you can say to them, you need to delete, change, add there. There's no structure in your piece, it's just starts slow, gets slower. So another feature, I suppose, about some of these ideas is it gives us a language to talk to students about what it is that we're doing. All right. A couple more songs. The songwriters used 3 sentence types. Okay, I won't sing this one. Simon and Garfunkel's I'm a Rock. A winter's day in a deep and dark December. I am alone, gazing from my window to the streets below, on a freshly fallen silent shroud of snow. I am a rock, I am an island. How about Meatloaf? It was a hot summer night and the beach was burning, there was fog crawling over the sand. When I listen to your heart, I hear the whole world turning. I see the shooting stars falling through your trembling hands. All right, so 3 sentence types. And certainly colour coding them, getting students to either do it on their computer or they do it on their printout. Let's identify those different colours. Okay. Now, reflections. I've got a sample in your book toward the end, and it's kind of printed so you can hold it up sideways. And it's all colour-coded, and it's a piece based on Sean Tan's The Arrival. And I didn't publish a picture of the photo in the booklet because they probably get upset about that. But here it is. This is the page from The Arrival, terrific book. No words in it. So we looked at this wordless book and we got the students to provide the narration for part of the story only. But the page was plenty. And it was when the father is leaving their home to go overseas to try and establish a better life for the people. And this is the farewell moment. So just the piece that you've got in your booklet is in response to that picture. I just thought I'd orientate you to that. So that's one of those opportunities where we're giving them the subject matter and the theme's pretty obvious. They just need to use those other techniques to create their piece. All right. Just some of the other details that I've got in your handout there that I've summarised on the back page. Think about converting similes to metaphors. Similes are good. Sometimes metaphors are better. Let's just have a look at this example. The sun came up on that cold morning. It was golden in colour. Go back, student X, whose name was Nick. What else can we do with that? The sun was like a golden blanket on the cold hills. That's better. What else can we do for it? can we get that blanket doing something, convert that simile into action? The sun threw its golden blanket over the cold shoulders of the hill. Got a bit of personification there too. All right, something from my youth. The old nun was like an armoured tank. Sister Helen swung the hefty turret of her torso to bring my head into range of the meaty artillery of her fist. And just to spice it up a little, beneath her thick brown robe, her army tank legs crunched into gear and she began to roll towards me. Her pistons pumped harder, fueled by the side of my hand on Angela Morano's leg. I was imagining that. Too late, I realised, inside the turret of her raised sleeve, a meaty fist was being loaded for me. So there's this, developing this idea. Look, okay, I've got this good idea. You get exhausted writing every sentence, expanding it like that, but I think there's opportunities in a piece of narrative just to spice up some moments that are really important. And to get students working on something, okay, let's have a look at this little detail here and let's try and work it through. We're just about out of time. There's a couple of other examples there. And just so I know something about noun groups, there's the Bremer River that runs through mighty Ipswich, the mighty Bremer, the meandering brown snake of mud and chemical waste, the clogged artery of the city's dying heart. So just another opportunity to have a conversation with the student. Just do a delete, change, add. Let's work on extending that metaphor. Let's develop that theme. Where's your reflection? Where are your 3 sentence types? Can we change that? You keep referring to the river, the river, the river. How else can you refer to that? So there's, yes, a bit of a smorgasbord of ideas there. Hopefully you can see the progression and how it perhaps could be used in the classroom bit by bit, and hopefully at the end of it the students will be producing some nice pieces like we've seen today. Many thanks for your attention.